So I want you to imagine that you are your karate instructor, or if you already are a karate instructor, you can just imagine that you are yourself, and you're in your dojo before class, and the TARDIS from Doctor Who materializes in front of you. Doctor Who steps out and says, in 5 minutes time, an 8-year-old boy is going to walk through those doors for his very first karate class. And in a year's time from now, the bullies at his school are going to start a campaign of terror, which is going to make a massive chunk of his childhood an absolute misery. And also, more importantly, it's going to affect his confidence and his self-esteem and his decision-making well into his adulthood. You cannot tell anyone I was here or that I've told you this stuff. And with that, he hops back in the TARDIS and disappears. So now that you know that these attacks are imminent and you need to prepare this little boy for a campaign of bullying, because that's what bullying is, it's a ongoing campaign, how are you going to teach him? Now you could go, well, I've got to teach him the basics because he's got to learn good, strong, fundamental techniques, surely. So I've got to teach him the blocks, even though, well, none of them actually defend a swinging punch without massive modification to how they're taught in most styles, but nothing's perfect. I've got to teach him first kata. I've got to spend hours teaching him the pattern and all that kind of stuff, because first kata is really important to develop deep stances, and that's important to develop strong technique. And I've got to teach him step sparring so he can learn how to time blocks, because of course everyone attacks you from an outrageously long distance with a straight punch. That's what he's going to need to defend himself against. And I've got to teach him point sparring because I need him to be conditioned to deal with hundreds of, if not thousands of repetitions of straight punches and kicks, because that's also how bullies are going to attack him. No bully's going to throw a springing punch at school. Geez, from here, that's not how schoolboys fight at all. Of course they're going to throw straight punches and kicks, and they're definitely not going to grapple him, because that's against the rules of sparring as well. Well, obviously I'm taking the mick, because those things, teaching Kihon basics and kata and sparring, especially the aesthetic of kata and sparring in a point sparring fashion, from here is what you do to prepare students for a 3K karate grading. However, you could alternatively, I should say, take a much more pragmatic approach, and you could look at the problems at hand and look at the scenarios and situations that he is likely to face and develop solutions and develop a way of training that solves those problems. So obviously you probably would still teach him fundamental techniques, but you probably want to teach him fundamentals in context as soon as possible. So you might still punch in the air for a little bit, but then you'd want to teach him how to hit pads and make sure his basics are very, very context driven and he knows that they're going to work in real life. And as well, you'd want to make sure that your blocks actually do, you teach at least a couple of blocks that actually do defend haymakers, or at least one. You also want to teach loads of context-driven self-defense, how to get out of bear hugs, how to deal with someone who tries to push or shove you, how to deal with lapel grabs, how to deflect those shoves and pushes and grabs from here away, and also how to get out of them if you are grabbed, how to deal with a hockey punch being grabbed and punched, how to deal with someone if someone loads up a big punch, how to burst forwards and block that punch, simultaneously counterattack them, control their limbs and turn the tables on them almost immediately. How to deal with a barrage of punches, because that's what actual schoolboy fights actually look like from here. So if they're caught off guard or whatever and they're now in that situation where they're being swarmed, from here, how to turn the tables and recover from that situation. How to deal with multiple attackers, at least the basic dynamics of multiple attackers of trying not to be surrounded, keeping your opponents in line. How to get up off the floor so you can't be, protect yourself on the floor so you can't be kicked and punched when you're on the ground from here, and also how to get up away from your opponents so they can't kick you and punch you as you're getting up. As well as awareness and avoidance and de-escalation skills, and even basic psychology of bullies, and from here how bullies try and pick on people weak, and you need to present yourself as a hard target, and also to bullies are people to be pitied because they're weak inside. So that would be the other approach. Now, of course, my first question is from here, which of the two do you think best prepares that boy for the bullying that is imminent in his future? And of course, it's got to be the pragmatic approach. Now, the next question is what happens in your class right now? Which of the two versions from here is actually taught in your class? Is it more the pragmatic approach, or is it more the 3K karate approach? So here's the rub. That child, he's already in your classes. You see, 40% of kids are going to be bullied at some point in their childhood. Now, a lot of those cases might be relatively minor, but it's enough for a lot of kids to think about suicide, which is a scary thought from here if it gets bad enough for children to consider committing suicide. So even if you run my point is even if you run a small club from here, and even if you discount all of the minor bullying, which still massively affects kids' self-esteem and is horrible for them, but even if you disregard all the minor ones, the statistics are, and the probability is, that at least a handful of your students are really going to rely on the self-defense that you teach in order to protect themselves both emotionally and physically from the effects of being targeted for bullying. Hopefully you teach so well that they will avoid the bullies from here, and they will and they will hold themselves in such a stature from here that the bullies will avoid them in the first place. But the statistics are your students will need what you are going to teach them. And it's not just bullying we have to worry about. There are loads of other violent crimes from here that we need to protect our students from that are relatively likely to happen. So, for example, what if Doctor Who had come down and said, you know that 13-year-old girl in your class? Well, in 3 years' time, the boy she had a crush on for 2 years is going to attempt to rape her at a party she's going to attend. It's a simple fact from here, or a alarming fact, more important, not simple, but an alarming fact, that 1 in 10 women will be raped. 1 in 4 women in this country, in the UK, will be the victims of physical domestic violence. That's not an uncommon thing. So are you preparing your students for that? Have you taught basic ground fighting, and from here basic grappling, and how to get a guy from on top of you off from here and if he's is your training from here strongly teaching assertive skills from here, or is it just mainly focused on performing a really neat kata that's going to help them pass a grading? So and it's not just, and like there are loads of other self-defense situations people need to prepare for. Some of them really serious. Knife crime is on the rise in this country. Also, too, parents always live in fear of their children being abducted, and sadly, one woman is murdered every week in this country by her lover or ex-lover. So my point is, violence is probably a lot more prevalent than most people think it is, and also that because the consequences can be so dire, it's important, so important, that we teach our students practical self-defense skills. That's good conscience karate, because the chances are that at least a couple of them, or a large portion of them actually, are going to need it and are going to depend on the skills that you are potentially going to teach them. So if you'd like to find out more about whether the karate that you learn is good for self-defense, I've got a video about that. And also, so if you're wondering why the hell would you not be teaching practical karate, I've got a video about that too. As always, train hard, train smart, think common sense.